Welcome to Private Club Radio, your weekly source for industry education, news and discussion. Broadcasting from Tampa, Florida, ladies and gentlemen, here is your host, Gabriel Aloisi.
Hey folks, fresh back from Atlanta here. Just had a great trip to visit my client's Dunwoody Country Club and got to also tour the Cherokee Town and Country Club with Kim Crandall. And what an exceptional property that is. Both of them, really. I mean, Atlanta is just very lucky with the clubs they have up there. But it was my first time on property at Dunwoody Country Club. Been working with them for 3 years, but first time I've been there. And I want to give a shout out to the amazing individuals at that club. Rachel Kirkman, who does an amazing job as the social director and puts on some fabulous events. And I was with two rising stars in club management, Dominique Gray and Ben McWilliams, who gave me a fantastic tour of the facilities. Let me tell you, the golf course is in immaculate shape. You might as well be at Augusta just looking at that course. Just beautiful green grass, no blade out of place. And they have a really unique tennis facility with this beautiful viewing area. There's a bar and a little dining area where the members can look out at all the tennis courts in like this 360-degree panorama. And you're up a couple levels, and it's just really unique. Hadn't seen anything like that before at a club. Just really well thought out. And they've done some incredible renovations to the club. They continue to do work on that club. And so if you're in the Atlanta area, I definitely recommend you look into Dunwoody Country Club. Just a beautiful place. And then over at Cherokee Town and Country Club, it was great to see Kim Crandall and my partner on the ABCs of Plutonium Private Club Leadership, Mr. Michael Crandall, who is just a fascinating individual, an outrageous individual. And we've got a little video that I recorded that I'll post up tomorrow on my LinkedIn page and probably my Instagram page as well. The guy always has wisdom to bring to the table, and he talks about how your club can immediately get on a wait list and fill up its membership. You're not going to believe it unless you see it. And like I said, I'll get that video up tomorrow for you to watch. It's a really cool one. Now, my guests today are two amazing individuals. We're going to be joined by Rick Ladendorf and Craig Marshall, who are oftentimes referred to as the Monk and the Mastermind, and you'll find out why on this episode. But they've got an exciting program that they're bringing to private clubs, and they've got two incredible gifts to give you at the end of this episode, so make sure that you stay tuned to the entire interview. But without further ado, here is Craig and Rick. Well, I'm very excited to bring on our next guests, Craig Marshall and Rick Ladendorf of Prevo Health. They've got an interesting background. They're often referred to as the Monk and the Mastermind. So let me tell you a little bit about Rick. Rick's the founder of Prevo Health. He's the executive producer of the America's Healthiest and Greenest Club programs. He's been in the business for 25 years. And since 2012, visited 300 clubs, spoke with over 5,000 department heads. So he has incredible amount of resources to bring to us. And then Craig Marshall is a really unique individual. He began his career as a child actor in Hollywood, and he was influenced by three mentors, Ronald Reagan, Shirley Temple, and Donna Reed. He later graduated from the USC Film School, and at that point, Craig's life took a left turn. He became a yoga monk with Self-Realization Fellowship, where he lived in a monastery for 35 years. And as a respected Swami, Craig lectured to large audiences on mindfulness and meditation. He then became a mentor to many well-known people, names you've definitely heard of like Steve Jobs, George Harrison, and even fashion icon Fred Segal. Craig shares with leaders a message of empowerment, sustainability, and collaborative solutions. Rick and Craig, welcome to Private Club Radio. Well, I am excited to speak with you gentlemen today about a program that you're in the middle of launching. It's called the 7 Mindful Living Habits of a Sustainable Club. How did this idea form, and how did you guys get together?
Yeah, Gabe, this is Rick. And in 2012, I started the America's Healthiest Club program, a certification program that recognizes private country clubs and city clubs, yacht clubs, tennis clubs for their overall health and wellness, looking at the club holistically for both members and the staff. And 5 years into this, we had evaluated over 100 clubs, visited a number of different organizations, interviewed, like I said, thousands of people, and came to the realization that health and wellness was important, but it wasn't really reaching everybody in the club industry. As you can imagine, not every club has fitness centers, etc. So when I met Craig Marshall through a client of ours, we were doing a health retreat for, Craig was one of the featured speakers. And within about 10 minutes, I realized that there was something about Craig that was very unique and how it applied to what we're doing in health and wellness. And we really started talking about his teachings of over 40 years and my 25 years experience in the club industry. And we really came to the conclusion that mindfulness was really the catch-all umbrella word for what I think every person is looking for, both personally and professionally. And so when we started talking about his experience and my club background, we really decided that there's a need for applying practices that can help modify and change behavior from old school thinking to new school thinking, so we can deal with some of the issues like stress and that work-life conflict that people have. And so when we got together, we spent a lot of time putting together the curriculum of the 7 mindful living habits of a sustainable club. And we've been out speaking and educating now for over a year, doing lots of workshops, consulting, coaching, and it's been just really phenomenal how what I would say is 90% of the people we talk to are really interested in this concept of mindfulness. Now the question is, how do we apply mindfulness to the business? And that's what this program is all about.
That's very cool. So I'd love to take a deep dive into maybe 2 or 3 of the concepts on this. So Craig, could you start us off with one of those habits?
Sure. Just about everybody we talk to these days, Gabe, is dealing with the same symptoms in life. And I think the club industry is kind of a micro capsule of what's going on in the wide world, because we're all reflections of our environment. But there's just a lot of unknowns these days. I think it's fair to say that we're living in a huge transition time. And you remember Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants that started, that's an old concept that he incorporated in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But on that chart, it's a measure of 2 items. One is time. It has to do with urgency, right? And the other has to do with importance. So if something's in quadrant 1, it's both important and urgent. And I think in the club industry, a lot of people kind of live in quadrant 1. And eventually that burns us all out because it's not natural. There's stress, there's unrealistic due dates. It's like this business concept of doing more with less. Yeah. That's a formula for burnout, right? And so that's what this mindfulness approach really addresses, but on a root level. So Rick originally asked me, he said, you've counseled so many people. You know the personal problems, you know about their work, you hear about family issues, because it's all part of the mix called our consciousness, right, on any given day. And he said, do you think those could be boiled down and we could present them like habits, like Stephen Covey's 7 habits, to really help people in very pragmatic, doable ways? So we went through all this information that I had been teaching for a long, long time and came up with these 7 habits. And they're kind of generic. Let me roll through them quickly, and then, as you say, we can go into one of them. The first is greater awareness. Awareness is a big word. It's like mindfulness. It's a kind of fuzzy, generic word. We're not quite sure what it entails. To some people, it may sound woo-woo or California hippie stuff, but it's not. It's very pragmatic, and it has to do with creativity, balance, integration, depth, perspective, peace of mind, these really necessary items. So that's greater awareness. And the second is the power of purpose and really being part of a purpose-driven organization. And we find that just about every club has a mission statement and a purpose statement, and they're on the wall somewhere. But when you ask the line staff what that really is, nobody can tell you unless they have a card in their wallet that they read it off of, right? So how to integrate all of those high ideals into our daily life is really what this is about, Gabe. So then we have one of the habits is inspired leadership. And many of the things we talk about, they do not teach in school. They do not teach at these conferences, the educational programs that we hear about. And so we get really down to the roots of that. The fourth habit is culture and community. So this is sort of the vibe, the tone, the real practical definition, respect, collaboration, inspiration, all of those things that make a happy family or a happy work environment. Fifth is creativity and innovation. There's a lot of literature on that, but there's a lot of obstacles to that too. There's egos, there's silo mentalities, there's just overwork, there's fear of failure, there's lack of the communication and the channels to really move people up the chain in terms of upward mobility and getting the best ideas forward. Number 6 is change and transition. We're pretty much aware of all the pressures on all of us in every area of life these days, so we really get down to the building blocks of that. And finally is core communication skills. And that's something that I'd like to talk about just for a moment, because in my long life of dealing with communication issues, the 3 most important things about it, and these are really high-level skills, is listening. We all know we can be better listeners. The second is questioning. And the third is storytelling, because these are the ways people are programmed to absorb information. So we have specific ways and tools and processes to really help people with their listening, their questioning, and their storytelling. So maybe later on in the program, we'll get into an issue that has to do with questioning, which is very, very short, but very, very powerful.
I'd love to do that. Absolutely. So what do you guys find to be some of the big ones that stick out? Like, what are some of the big problems that most clubs are facing? It seems like when I'm doing some consulting, a lot of times it is communication issues. What are some of those other things that really stick out for you guys?
That is an interesting question, Gabe. And the answer to that is time. We are so busy doing capital projects, so busy, just dealing with the operational issues. And so it's really about time. And that's the biggest challenge we have, because we have a saying that, or a question that we ask, is your mind full or are you mindful? And that's an interesting question, because we hear this all the time, that I just can't absorb anymore. I just can't take anymore. I'm so busy. I've got so many things going on. And what's funny about that is that's the exact time when you really need to be more mindful, because that's the time when you can start to calm yourself down and manage that stress. And, it's interesting to me when we look at some of the statistics. I'll just read off a couple of them because I think they're really powerful and the reason why we're doing what we do. But it starts with the first and foremost premise that all employers that we talk to say that their employees are the number one asset of the club. And yet we find that most of the clubs don't invest enough in education or personal development. And some studies have come out that said that only 21% of the employees strongly believe that they're managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. 80% of the workers surveyed said they feel stress. 35% say their job is negatively affecting their physical or emotional well-being. And 42% say that the pressures that they face interfere with their family or personal life. These are powerful numbers that are coming from studies nationwide, of course, but the club industry exemplifies that and accentuates that as well. So we find time is probably the biggest issue, and what we're trying to do is help them manage that time and the pressures that they have because of that lack of time and being overwhelmed and stressed.
I would absolutely agree with you. Craig, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, in general, I think one of the club managers down in Florida said it best, and this is a person who works in a very big, very dynamic, very successful club that has a lot of services and many hundreds of employees. They said to Rick and I don't want you to make our people better managers. I want you to make them better people, because then they'll be better managers. And I think that's the little extra gear that Rick and I offer, and that's really the essence of mindfulness. Because if people are stressed, they're not going to be themselves. They're not going to be creative. They can't offer top flight service because they're possibly tired. They are reactive. They may have unresolved conflicts going on in their head. And how present can you be for either a member or at meetings or to come up with next steps? Because I hate to get philosophical, but Mr. Einstein said that no problem can be resolved on the level at which it was created, right? That's pretty standard wisdom. And so that is a cry for what? For innovation, for creativity. We can't solve today's problems with today's technologies or methodologies. We need tomorrow's. That's what innovation is. So how do we get to that next level? Not only through best practices that everybody tries to apply, but best sort of personal practices. That's what mindfulness is. Because if we had robots serving, if you could program machines to serve food and set up tea times and deliver food and answer questions and greet newcomers and all that, you could program the whole thing. But these are human interactions, every one. So the members and the staff all have the same needs. They want to be heard. They want to be themselves. They want to make a difference. They're interested in greater humanity. Sometimes they don't know how to do it or express it. And so that's where we come in.
Yeah,
Does
it does.
sense?
Now, I also want to unpack one of the things you mentioned before when you talked about Stephen Covey and those quadrants and how we often live in that, putting out fires mode all the time. What is some of the shifts or what's some of the advice that you give to people to get them out of that mode?
Well, mindfulness in those four quadrants would be firmly in quadrant 2. And by definition, what that means is that it's as important as what you're doing in quadrant 1, but it's not as urgent, or so people think. Oh, I can get by, because nobody disagrees with the potential value that we're offering to people. Nobody says you guys are crazy or this is too abstract. They just ask questions. When can I find time to plug this in? How can I change the culture? How can we make these upgrades that you're talking about? Because we're already so full. The schedule is packed and people are fried, especially during the season. Well, that's why we've come up with mini practices. And there are probably 1,000 of them, Gabe, to answer your question. So what we've done is we realize we're pragmatists, Rick and I. We're not going to send people back to school. They don't have time. It's not a reboot. So what we're doing is kind of on-the-job training in a drip campaign, and we've developed something called Monk in a Box. It's kind of a cute handle, and I laugh because it's like I feel like I'm a little Buddha statue sitting on people's desks that they can pick up and turn upside down and get a quick answer, But in a sense, that's true. We offer bite-sized practices. So in this Monk in a Box, it's a mobile app. They can get a ton of inspiration, very practical answers to questions. It's subject indexed in several different ways. So if they're having a problem with a person, problems with their schedule, confusion about this, they want some communication tips like we were talking about earlier, all of that stuff is available with little 3 to 5 minute bites. These are videos, audios, text to-dos, little issues like that can really, really make a difference. And I think you've probably heard of some of these mobile apps that are proliferating these days, like Headspace and Calm, and I read in the Los Angeles Times recently that the Calm app is now valued at over $1 billion. So there is a worldwide need for that kind of grounding, if you will, because we're living in very uncertain times. And it's like whether you're raising kids or holding down a job or trying to be a good citizen, it's like there's just so many conflicts and so much confusion. And people are trying to, I think, get back to these time-honored basics. And our material is very simple. You could really teach it to kids. But yet what we've done is we've customized it to meet the needs specifically of the club industry. Rick has known these people, worked with these people. He's been in the trenches now for a long, long time. So this is not philosophy. It's not generality. It's very specific and gets right to the core of their issues. And that's what we and they are excited about.
Well,
Yeah, and Gabe, I think that, yeah, and we go back to purpose, right? That one thing we talk about is purpose, and it's very difficult for a private club manager or management team to identify what their purpose is. We can talk about how they do it, what they do, but why they do what they do is sometimes very difficult for a club to describe. So if you look at our purpose and our why, we believe that mindfulness is an idea that whose time has come. And what we're really doing, our vision, is to build a network of conscious professionals that really understand the essence of being more mindful. What does that mean? Well, at the end of the day, we believe that all clubs want to be known as a club of choice. They want to be known in their community as a great employer. They want to be known as a good neighbor. And when you really boil it down, that's really the essence of being relevant and sustainable. And that's what we start to look at is, well, how does that happen? If you are a group of conscious professionals and mindful of one another, how we speak to each other, how we engage with one another, then certainly that's going to improve the member experience. And by doing that, of course, that creates that relevancy and that longevity that all clubs are looking for, and more importantly, job security for many of the leaders, of course, because of the way the board governance works and the boards, how they flip every 3 years, et cetera. But I think it's really important to understand why we're doing this. And by building a group of mindful leaders, it's much easier to attract other mindful potential staff and members. So when you talk about your culture on the interviewing process, we believe that part of that has to include the concept of being mindful in what we do to help our staff to reduce the stress, be more calm at work, to be more relaxed, be more engaged, be more creative, more collaborative, and at the end of the day, co-create that next culture that's evolving at the club. I'm frankly surprised that after 100 years in some clubs that they're still trying to figure this out. They've been around for 100 years, and yet they still have struggles and they have turnover. And turnover is chaotic and it's costly and it's very confusing, and it prevents a club from actually achieving their vision and what that strategy is. And if they do have that purpose defined, I think it's really difficult. So building a network of conscious professionals sounds like a massive undertaking, but in reality, it really starts at the manager's level meetings and each weekly meeting and how they communicate with one another and how they're talking about the vision and the purpose. And so these mindful practices, as Craig says, we've got many of them that can actually change the behavior and change the culture. And I think that this idea whose time has come is upon us. And there are some really great clubs. For example, Broken Sound. Broken Sound had us in to do a mindful lecture for their members. So we did a 90-minute lecture for their members, and they wanted us to start a mindful club within the club. Then they asked us to speak to their 30 department heads, and we spent 3 hours in a workshop. And within an hour, Carol Betcher, who is a thought-provoking, innovative HR director, called me up and said, Rick, we need you here every quarter. We want you here because this provides us the ability to refresh when we need to refresh our staff. We need to re-energize them in the high season. We need to reinvigorate them. And so we were impressed by that because that really provides the continuity that we believe is lacking with most of these educational programs that are just sitting on the shelf in 3-ring binders, the day after you come back from a workshop. We don't believe that works. we believe that continuity and these bite-sized pieces of information are what really will make a difference and make change happen. And that's what
Yeah,
it's
well,
all
you're
about.
right. I think, number 6 on your list is change in transition. And it's such it's staggering when I hear the figure that the average tenure of a general manager, for instance, is like 2 years or 2.5 years, depending on who you talk to. And of course, boards changing over just about every year. And, I'd love to just dive into that one a little deeper and hear from you guys. What are some of the practices that can affect that change in transition, and how you can be a little bit more mindful about that?
I think in general, people use the scapegoats of time and money. I don't have enough time and I don't have enough money. And really, I don't believe those are the root causes of these challenges that we're itemizing here. I think those are just excuses. And really, if I had to answer that question, what is the fundamental problem in the club industry that would make the biggest difference on the most levels? I would say it's how we think. And the cardinal rule of systems thinking is that how you think is more important than what you think. Have you ever heard that, Gabe? And so how do we think about these things? And, I'm sort of a weird bird because I have not lived a high-stress life. I have not lived with unresolved issues. And that's one of the reasons that I became a monk, as I was looking for that groundedness, And I was graduating from USC, and I was just about ready to go into the workforce. And I thought, I don't have the maturity, the awareness, the clarity. You talk about purpose. It was fuzzy for me. I wasn't really prepared to go out and be a successful person. And so when I became a monk, I was very, very intrigued by Eastern philosophy because of its depth and because of the meditation practices. And I said to myself, this is what I need to get my head straight. I'm so confused. I'm going in circles. I'm influenced by a lot of different cross currents, and I'd like to go down to a deeper level. And so in the ashram, we meditated 5 times every day in both group and private meditations. And yet we were busy. We had committee meetings, we had purchase orders, we had international travel. This was a big organization. And so people regularly ask me, what was your primary takeaway? What did you really learn in 35 years of living that lifestyle? And so I wrote them down, and I just want to share them with you because I think these are really the core answers to the question you're asking about what fundamental change could make this industry a lot more successful on a deeper level. So what I learned is that I have a higher and a lower self. I think we all do. We have an inspired higher self, which is very creative and open and really can get us in touch with our intuition. But we have a lower self. We have an ego. We can all be petty. We can all be reactive. We can all get scared. We can all be lazy. So I have those two selves. That's number one. Number two, I came to the very blunt conclusion that I was creating my own reality with my beliefs, my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. It's very, very subjective. And so I started taking more responsibility and stop blaming circumstances and stop blaming other people and stop blaming time and money because they weren't really my fundamental problems. My problems were interior. And number three, mindfulness or awareness creates clarity. If people can just learn a little breathing technique and get calm, which takes maybe 3 minutes, because normally we think, the yogis say, about 1,000 thoughts an hour. That's a drumbeat of a thought every 2 2/3 seconds. Thought, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, thought, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, thought. Those thoughts just keep on coming. How do we slow down the bubble machine? That's where meditation comes in. And when you get a little more still and a little more calm, creative ideas come in. You don't take things so seriously. You're actually more successful but with less fuss and feathers flying.
Yeah.
Number 4 is that clarity translates to a positive momentum. When we're really clear about something, we're confident, we're creative, we can communicate well, and we get on a roll. But without that clarity, we sort of are guessing at things, we're reacting to things, and that's why quadrant 1 is a slow burn. The 5th thing I learned is that I need to both learn and also to unlearn, because I was programmed in the 20th century, right? So I have a lot of beliefs that are almost old school. We're living in a very fast-moving time. And I don't know if you remember that book written by Alvin Toffler back in 1970 called Future Shock. You remember that
I didn't
book?
read that one.
Well, it was a very interesting book. It was kind of a hot item in that time because Alvin Toffler was a futurist, and he made all these predictions about what was going to be happening in 50 years. So it's kind of relevant now because we're almost there, 2020. And what he said, his main deduction was we're all going to have to learn so much, so fast, that we can't handle it. And so there's this quote in that book, and it says this: the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So it really is a cry for us to question our education and look for some new innovative ways of doing business. And I think that's what we're trying to open up the box for and offer to the club industry. And lastly, I think we need to recognize that in a more conscious world, as we evolve, there's going to be a new and better way to do almost everything, right? So it's like, what is that way? Are we open? Are we really dialoguing with people about next steps? Because if we're not, we're going to have a real disconnection with the millennials, not to mention Generation X, Y, and Z. So I think it's a new age, and it requires some new thinking. That's my
absolutely. I think that's fascinating stuff. Rick, I'd love to hear how you go about working with clubs. 'Cause I know you talked about going in and working directly with the teams, but what are some of the other ways that you guys can do this, or how do you take advantage of this program?
First of all, we do workshops throughout the country. We're in Hilton Head and Boca and Naples, Scottsdale, Los Angeles. So we actually host these workshops where department heads and club leaders can actually come in and spend 3 hours with us to get a feel for what mindfulness is and how we can apply it to their business. And then we also speak throughout the country at various association events, CMAA chapter events throughout the country. So that's how somebody might see us, of course. But I think when you really look at the bigger picture, you have to understand that we're looking at mindfulness as both a member and a staff solution. On the staffing side, which is what we've been talking about, certainly energizes the team and that sort of thing. So once they've got a taste of what we're doing, we'll actually come out and do on-site education for the club, as well as these workshops where we bring in multiple clubs. But at the end of the day, there's on-site education, there's online education through our mobile app. We have an email program that we deliver drip emails so that it's a constant flow of weekly tips and clips. And, so we've got a number of different ways to reach the club. But when you really look at it, Gabe, this is one of those topics that you just can't do it through a webinar, right? This is face-to-face, one-on-one, really understanding who they are, their purpose, their vision, their strategy. And so we do it a number of different ways. We're certainly on the road quite a bit, but we really enjoy meeting with the members and the staff.
There may be no substitute, Gabe, for coaching. We do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I would think that a lot of your listeners are saying, this all sounds great, but how could I sell this to my people? How could I justify this? And really, when it boils down to one of the clients that we were dealing with, he said that one of his employees told him after going through our communication module, he said, "I'm now a better listener, and I no longer listen just to be polite." How valuable is something
totally.
like that, you know? And another gal said, "I've become more curious, and I understand the value of beginner's mind, which allows me to ask more relevant questions." And so I wrote down a few of these things because I thought, wow, this is really the proof of the pudding. One fellow said, "My manager is threatened by me, but I got around this by learning to ask him really great questions."
No.
And I thought, that's a high communication skill. Instead of making statements, start asking people questions, changes the dynamic, you know. And another one said, "I've outgrown my action addiction, and I started prioritizing my most important tasks." I think a lot of us are action addicts. You know, we have a to-do list, we go through our emails, and we just swing into action. Gotta go, you know. And we don't have time to really think through it and really weigh these issues to deal with what's most important all the time. And another person told me, "I now am able to focus on the things I have control over." And I thought, wow, you have grown up, you know, if you're not wasting energy bitching and whining about things that you don't have any control over. And finally, a person said after they went through a particular program, he said, "I now think of new creative options which used to be blocked by my cynicism." You know, skepticism, cynicism, these kinds of things are definite products of burnout. And they start slowly, but people do start shutting down. And so we have even metrics to determine, are you getting the most out of your people? And so we help managers identify their potential champions. We start empowering those people. And it starts with 1 and 2 people. You start a little mini core and spread it out from there. You're not going to turn over a whole culture. You're not going to educate everybody from scratch and send them back to school. It's too much energy. But in this drip campaign, we have really scientific processes of getting those few people, then building a kind of informal buddy system, and they start supporting and empowering each other. And then pretty soon it becomes so magnetic where new people want a piece of it. And it's like, what are you doing? Why are you so happy? That was a great idea. We get people to reach out and invite other people into it. And slowly but surely, you get people to grow up, take more responsibility, get more creative, and then you have that different culture that we all dream about.
It sounds like you guys have really put together a comprehensive program, covers all sorts of different bases. I love it. And you mentioned there coaching, and I know that you're giving our listeners a pretty cool little gift, a complimentary coaching session. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So what we believe is all clubs are unique. There's no template that works for everybody. And so what we do is we start off by offering the club managers an opportunity to do a complimentary 1-hour coaching session. And that coaching session is really to define and understand the vision, the strategy, the purpose, the issues that the club manager has. And so what we do throughout that 1-hour complimentary process is really get to the core of what really matters. And so during that 1 hour, then we determine what makes sense for that club. And again, timing is always an issue. Some clubs are not ready for that, and so we might need to follow up later on. But ultimately, that coaching session really gets to the core of what really matters to the club.
And then you've got an ebook as well, another gift for our audience, The Next You. Craig, tell us about that, and how do they get a hold of that book?
If they send Rick or I an email, and we'll give you that information, I'm happy to send anybody a PDF of this book. And this book really hones in on the idea that all of us have a next step. There's a next chapter waiting for all of us. And, you know, transitions are interesting because they usually get kicked off by one or more of 3 things. Ironically, all transitions begin with an end. It's either the end of a job, the end of a relationship, or the end of like a sense of self, like in a midlife change. And I think we're all going through those in subtle and sometimes major ways. But in those times, as painful as they are, and as much as the ego resists change and transition, that's where we learn the most. So when people are in transitions, I find that they're most open to this shift. So that's what that book, The Next You, is all about. So we'll send you a PDF of that, and that's fantastic. Because, you know, I have my own definition of mindfulness, and I hesitate sharing it with people because it is so loaded. It is such a powerful statement. But to me, mindfulness is a heightened awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose, in the present moment, without judgment, open to learning and unlearning. Now that sounds like you're describing mastery. You know, that's like, whoa, that's like a Buddhist super aware state. But that's what we're dealing with. That's what we want. We all want to be more aware, right? We all want to pay attention and be more focused. We all want to align with our purpose. We all want to be present so we can really listen to people and go deeper and read between the lines and know what's really going on in situations. And we want to go beyond this judgments of just good and bad and right and wrong and look at it in more subtle and open ways. And we really want to learn. And I think a lot of us are up for unlearning to make room so we have some disk space for all of that. So when you're up for it, I'd like to go through a little process that'll give people a great sample of
how do we go about doing that? How do we reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way is to Craig at 7 mindfulhabits.com. And the same goes for Rick at 7mindfulhabits.com.
That's fantastic. And I definitely encourage all our listeners to reach out and get that ebook and learn a little bit more about what Craig and Rick are doing, because I really think it's going to completely change not only yourself personally, but the entire culture of your club. And I really love what you guys are doing. I appreciate you taking the time and sharing some of that with us here on Private Club Radio, gentlemen.
Well, thanks for having us, Gabe. It's been a pleasure.
Great to be with you.
Well, that's going to wrap things up for this edition of Private Club Radio. I'll be back with another exciting interview for you next week. Can't wait to see you then. Until then, here's to your membership success.
Private Club Radio is brought to you by Concert Golf Partners, helping to preserve and enhance private golf and country clubs. Concert Golf has the capital, expertise, and private club hospitality experience to help upscale private clubs achieving long-term success and membership growth. For 25 years, Concert Golf has allowed private club members to focus on simply enjoying their club. Visit concertgolfpartners.com to learn more about the recapitalization process.